I don't think I'm actually giving this presentation anymore. I've slightly tweaked it since I've basically kind of got here through subterfuge, just lying about what I'm going to talk about. I've got a countdown clock here, and I'm really aware of the fact that that is the countdown to lunch, so I'm currently standing between you and probably a buffet out there. So I'll try and get through it a little bit quicker than that. Just hurry me up if I take too long. Marvelous. So I'm going to talk today about flowers on roundabouts, and I'll explain why in a second. The first thing to tell you is that I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Little Giant up in Auckland, but for the purposes of today, I am Ian Howard, a 38-year-old man who's sleep-deprived thanks to his two very young children. I'm British, which means I inherently have a sense of cynicism that I find really hard to get over. And I'm going through what I like to call a renaissance, and my wife calls a midlife crisis at the moment, which means that I'm spending a lot of my time playing board games like this. Does anyone know this board game? Is anyone going to admit to it here? Awesome, excellent. I'll catch up with you guys at lunchtime. This is a board game called Arkham Horror. It's based on the writing of H.P. Lovecraft. It's very odd. It comes with about a 40-page manual. It takes about 3.5 hours to play. I'm going to openly concede, I've never got through an entire game of this. I've got to about 2.5 hours. I once got to about 3 hours and then realized that I'd broken a couple of the rules that were in the manual, and so it didn't really matter what happened from there. Very, very frustrating, wonderfully joyous. I suspect if this went through a UX process, it would never exist, and that's why I bring it up. As part of my midlife crisis, I'm also going back and reading some of the literature that I kind of found formative in my teenage years, all those years ago, sort of watching some films that I enjoyed back then. Has anyone read any Paul Theroux? Yep. Like, awesome writer. Can't recommend him highly enough. Travel writer also. He wrote The Mosquito Coast, if anyone's seen that movie as well, which is a great piece of fiction. Now, a lot of Paul Theroux's writing is about experiences. It's not about travel, and I think there's a difference there. My favorite book of his is A Journey on the Trans-Manchurian Railway. He's a huge fan of trains. He likes getting from A to B and giving himself time to have serendipitous experiences while he does that. So his writing isn't about the places that he goes, the A to B, the kind of, and we kind of live in an aeroplane society. I came down from from Auckland yesterday. I wish I'd come on the Transrail. I would love to have seen the scenery on the way down. But because we're all in such a hurry, we just jump on a plane and forget that there's this wealth of experience opportunity in the middle and just concentrate on get there as quickly as we possibly can. And I feel like as UX practitioners, as people working in the kind of digital space, that's kind of become our lens. How do we get people there quicker? How do we get them to the destination? And we've forgotten, actually, how do we give them the opportunity for discovery, for serendipitous experiences on the way through? Can't recommend Paul Theroux highly enough. So look, I'm a bit cynical, and I think with two young kids, there are times when I despair about what the world might look like when they grow up. And I was stopping and thinking about how did we get to where we are now? And where I think we are now is that when you look at the amount of time that we spend in the digital realm and you think about the experiences that we have there, I think it's all become extraordinarily homogenous. Like we kind of live in a world of best practice driving to mediocrity, driving to just kind of generic experiences. And I was kind of wondering why. Now, I was in London back in 2007 when the GFC hit, and I know that in New Zealand, you guys were relatively ring-fenced from the GFC. Like, I don't think it hit here in the way it did in London. I had friends who went into work one day and were told that they were getting a 20% pay drop, like overnight. And it was that, or just don't come into work, it's kind of up to you. I had other people who were told to go and break out into teams and decide amongst themselves which of them was going to lose their job, which of them was going to take redundancy. Hard, right? I mean, we talk about research. There's a research group for you. That's pretty tough. So it was really pretty terrible times back in 2007. And if we think about when the kind of marketing and sort of product development started becoming very digitally focused, it was around that time. That's when Facebook kind of became mainstream. That's when we started doing a lot more in the realm of digital. And I think inherently that meant that the lens that we put over digital was, well, let's try and do this cheaply. Let's try and do this in a way that kind of, budgets were being tightened across businesses. Marketers were under a lot of pressure. There was, an enormous movement, particularly like the government at the time announced all these austerity measures, which meant that they would stop spending on anything other than stuff that was critical to the infrastructure of Britain at that time. And I was listening to the radio, and that was back in the days when there was the actual, radio. Do you remember that? God. Does anyone listen to the radio anymore? Where you had that little crackle in the background? It was like magic. And there was a guy from the opposition party in the UK, which was Labour then, as it is here, although it might not be for that much longer, let's see, who had the temerity to, on national radio, say, yes, look, there do need to be austerity measures, I understand this, but I don't want to live in a world where there aren't flowers on roundabouts. And he got absolutely slammed for it. Like, this made, kind of people love on radio like they do now on chat forums and, comment threads. They love to express opinions that they probably don't really hold, but, it gives them an opportunity to troll. He got completely and utterly slammed for the insensitivity of this comment. Now, forgive me here. I really liked that comment, and it stuck with me, because I think it taps into a genuine insight about the human experience that I think we often forget. And God, I hate bringing up Maslow's hierarchy of needs in this stuff. My apologies. I'm so sorry. But we're pretty needy, right? Actually, to kind of be happy and to be self-fulfilled, we ask for quite a lot. And I think with the emergence of digital and digital technology, we tend to fall short of this top level a lot. And that's what worries me about my kids kind of growing up in this world, that they may well live in a world that's really functional, that's very usable, that's seamless. I mean, how many of you write the word seamless, frictionless, intuitive, easy, as if that's what we crave from our existences? Now, I can promise you, Arkham Horror is not easy, it's not frictionless, it's not seamless, and yet it's something that I get an enormous amount of joy from. And I think we can remember that actually some of that complexity, that challenge, that's how we really get our sense of self-fulfillment. Now, what's driving that move towards kind of super simplicity and sort of utilitarianism, and I sometimes refer to it as kind of brutism, to be honest, like stripping everything back in the digital landscape. I think in part is that we've become slavish devotees of data. Now, I'm going to be really careful here because a lot of the presentations this morning were about kind of the research side of UX. Research is really important. Having data, really important. Slavishly following data, dumb. And I think there is way too much slavish following of data going on at the moment. I say data, by the way, sorry about that, data, whatever it is. I don't know. And as an example, I was wandering around, has anyone been to the Botswana Butchery? Apparently there's one in Queenstown, there's also one at the bottom of, is there one here? I don't know. Quite a nice restaurant. I was walking around a few months back and I passed the front door. I've never actually eaten there. And this is what their front door looks like. These are the door handles on the front door. I think quite cute, right? Quite a nice idea. Now, I have been through processes like this, now not specifically with this, but as an example of a process, where if this was in the digital world, someone in a meeting, maybe a client, maybe a stakeholder, maybe someone on your own team would say, but that's not what door handles look like. Like that's not best practice door handling. We can't possibly do that. People will get confused, like how will they open the door? This doesn't make any sense. Then someone will say, well, okay, well, that's just one opinion, but it's very subjective. Let's not worry too much about that. Let's think about it in more scientific terms. And someone with a knowledge of physics would then pull out the kind of law of moments. I'm going to try and remember the law of moments from my schooling here. Bear with me. It's to do with the kind of perpendicular element of the force around the pivot and the distance from the pivot. I can't remember exactly what the thing is. I don't know how to go back here, but if we go back to that handle, you'll have noticed that the handle was on a slight kind of incline from the door, which means actually when you pull it, you wouldn't just generate force around that pivot, you'd also generate force around the pivot at the top, which would mean some of the force is wasted, basically trying to pull the door upwards, not outwards. That's wasted effort. That's horrible. But, maybe that won't make a difference. Might be fine. So I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to A/B testing. Let's test a normal door handle with the meat cleaver door handles and see which perform best. And what's the most important thing? This is the entryway into the restaurant. The most important thing is it's got to be about speed, right? We want people to get into the restaurant because at that point we can start to monetize them and they'll become our patrons. Right. So Meat cleaver handle, normal handle. Oh, they see it just that little bit quicker because they recognize it's a door handle and they pull it, and because all the force actually causes it to open rather than losing that bit of force, doesn't take long to open the door. Meat cleaver one still doesn't take long, but takes a little bit longer. Slavish devotion to data, chuck back on a normal door handle, just to be safe, which is completely nonsensical and leads us into a world where every door handle looks the same. They're all just best practice door handles, and we lose that opportunity. And I don't think that meat cleaver on the door is going to do it. And there's probably not an ROI on that. It's probably hard to prove that that's doing anything in terms of brand equity or user experience around that. But it's a nice little moment that makes the world just that little bit more interesting. If we took UX principles and put them into the physical world, I imagine everyone here must shop online. I do it all the time. It drives my wife absolutely nuts. I'm a primate, by the way. Does anyone primate here? Mighty Ape, the prime thing? Which I've realized is complete nonsense, because then Amazon will be here in about a month's time, and then I will never use Mighty Ape again, probably. But it's useful for now, as I get free delivery. So, this checkout, absolutely perfect for the Countdown or New World or wherever you choose to shop, pack and save experience, get stuff through on the conveyor belt nice and quickly. But if you walked into a high-end fashion store and that was your checkout experience, probably slightly underwhelming. I met the founder of Workshop recently and sort of had this conversation with him. I can assure you that the Workshop checkouts don't look like this, and nor should they. It's kind of, horses for courses. And yet, on e-commerce stores, pretty much every checkout experience is absolutely identical. And as we shop more and more in those situations, how do we do something that delivers a distinct and differentiated experience even through to checkout? So we appear to have all become, and has anyone read Daniel Kellerman's Thinking Fast and Slow? Yeah, awesome, great. So you'll recognize a lot of this stuff from there. Great stuff. I'm going to do a little experiment in a second, so we'll get you all raising your hands. It appears that we've let the kind of system 2 side of our brain kind of take over from the system 1 side to a certain extent, kind of leaving behind the more empathetic and creative side of things, and concentrating much more on the sort of rational, people make decisions logically side of our brain, which just simply isn't true. We all think we're super smart. We're actually just mammals making dumb decisions half the time. So we need to get back in touch with this empathetic side of our brains. Now, I'll do a little test here. Who is seeing this dancer turning clockwise? Put your hands up. Okay. Who's seeing it anti-clockwise? And who can make it switch? Interesting. That's kind of about a third. Right, so if you're seeing it turn clockwise, chances are the rational side of your brain is probably ever so slightly more dominant. Incidentally, I think that science has proven that this actual sides thing, the left brain, right brain thing, isn't quite right. It's actually mapped across various different areas of the brain. If you're seeing it turn anti-clockwise, slightly more creative side of the brain, if you can make it switch, you've probably got a reasonably sort of balanced brain. I think it is incumbent on all of us to get ourselves into a position where we can train our brains to switch this. And it's perfectly possible to do. Now, I'm just going to get you, so for those of you that can't get it to switch, just hold your hand and look only at, basically, from about the calf down. Can you get it to switch now? Look it up online and train yourself. I love the looks of disappointment on people's faces there, by the way. They're like, I got clockwise. I want to get anti-clockwise, or vice versa. It's great fun. So this kind of rational, slightly unempathetic side of the brain, I think that's coming through even in the language that we use in this industry. I mean, if you think about traffic, there's something so deeply impersonal. I love the fact that other people have called out, it's about people. It's not about users. When I was growing up, if you called someone a user, that wasn't a great thing. So, what could we do to change that language set? I've tried at the agency that I'm at to remove users entirely from our language set. It hasn't worked. And in part, that's because our clients are used to the idea of users. We perpetuated this kind of thing of going, when they're on a digital platform, they're no longer people. And we just look at that slice of life instead of understanding all of their different motivations, understand that they might have kids and be going through a midlife crisis, and how might that have changed the experience that we deliver to them. Conversion, just such a brutal word. what if we thought about it instead of user as like visitor or something just a little bit more empathetic? So for me, visitor, as a term kind of has this idea of hospitality, it has this idea of going above and beyond. If someone was visiting your house, there'd be an element of, you wouldn't want them to leave going, well, that was functional, right? You'd want them to leave going, what a delightful experience. I really enjoyed that time there. What can we do to even change the language there to start thinking that way? Now, the other problem with data, incidentally, I like maths and numbers and so on, so this might come across as a bit like I'm shooting it down. But data can be used really, really, really poorly, and often to come to entirely the wrong conclusions. Now, I worked a few years back with, I have to be really careful because they're definitely not in the room, I've checked this morning, and I changed the axes here. I went to an all-agency briefing about 2 or 3 years ago where an enormous piece of research had been done over the course of about 9 months. It was very solid, very robust research. One of the conclusions that came up was that there was a correlation between the basically usage of a product, and it wasn't iPhones, and how much people knew about that product. And so the strategy that they then presented back was, so we need to educate more people about that product so that they'll use it more. Well, no, that's confusing correlation with causation. That would be the equivalent of saying there's a correlation between people with grey hair and old people. So if we concentrate on dyeing people's hair black, they won't get old. Right? Seriously. That's the equivalent. So it doesn't make any sense at all. You can tell that the grey hair thing is quite personal to me. We also see a lot of, and I'll skip on through this fairly quickly, but a lot of sort of analytics implementations that give us the wrong data as well, and that can lead to making the wrong decisions. Things like last-click attribution, just very, very dangerous modeling. And I would say that not doing analytics at all is better than doing analytics wrong, because you can absolutely make the wrong decisions through that. Now, this was really just an excuse for me to relive a boyhood dream back in June when I went to a Lions test, so let me just show a tiny bit of this. Oh, is it going to work? So Liam Williams skips away from a couple of the All Blacks, and he's 22. I was sitting over here somewhere at the time. Great run, draws the man. Gives it off to Davies. Elliot Daly on the wing, cuts inside, jinks outside. Back inside. All right, I'll move on. Fair enough. I've actually got the whole game embedded in the deck here. Now look, last-click attribution would ignore everything that you saw there and give every bit of credit to, it was Sean O'Brien who ended up dotting down. He got the ball about 2 yards out, put it down. Did very well to be a support runner in that situation. Probably doesn't deserve all of the credit for the try. And so, if you're in that situation and you had that analytics implementation, Warren Gatland might might drop Liam Williams. Oh, well, he didn't really do anything in the game, having just made that break. Really dangerous to get that stuff wrong. So I think we need to be really careful about making sure that we understand that it's not data versus creativity, that it's actually a nice fusion of the two, and that we can use data to help us unlock creativity, and that's where we'll get these serendipitous and kind of delightful experiences, and sort of build our brands and build affinity with our products. I've kind of pulled out a few examples of stuff that I really liked, and I think Carr actually went through the MailChimp stuff. I'm not quite sure where he is now earlier, but I thought that was a great example. Small little moments of delight. Has anyone seen this? I can't remember what platform it's off. Just a really nice little moment. That could just say click me or be a button, but the fact that there's a little bit of movement, a little bit of tactility, and bear in mind that as we move towards the sort of digital world, we are losing that sense of touch and that sense of tactility, so what can we do to reignite that? I love this one, that kind of fail thing. I would purposely hunt out pages that aren't going to work so that I can have that experience. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. It's such a lovely moment. Again, there's absolutely no need for the little animations on the left-hand side here. This would work absolutely fine and be perfectly best practice if you could just scroll through it. But there's just a little bit of delight about having that feedback and feeling like you touching something actually makes a difference. And then, the MailChimp thing. So I worked at ITV in the UK, and I used to send a weekly newsletter to 920,000 people. It was comfortably the worst moment of my week. I hated it with a passion. I sweated more than that monkey. what that is just so empathetic. It's a great piece of storytelling. Now, this is a guy that works down at Weta. We've just hired the former head of the internal studio down at Weta Workshop, and I was lucky enough to go down there the other day. Actually, just as a little segue, because I've noticed I've got 9 minutes left. As you go around, we were able to go around the bits that you can't normally go into and saw some incredible craft down there. There is a King Kong head about the size of this sort of doorway here, so absolutely huge, about 12, 15 feet high. Absolutely immaculately made, like everything was perfect. I went right up to it and I felt like it was about to breathe on me. It was pretty extraordinary. It apparently cost about $250,000 to put this thing together in total, and it was never seen on screen. It was purely there so that Naomi Watts had an eye line and had something that she could properly connect with to just pull out that tiny bit more from her performance. We also saw a suit of armor that was in The Hobbit, which I have to concede is a film I haven't yet seen. And they had engraved the entire inside of the suit of armor. The only person that will ever see that engraving was the actor. It will never be on screen, but again, it was just so that he could get that tiny bit extra out of his performance. And these are the small bits of kind of craft and creativity that I think we need to be bringing to the work that we do. What can we do that might not be heralded, might not be seen, might not win us awards, but that can make that small bit of difference? Outside of that as well, moving away from kind of best practice stuff, one of the things that we do in the agency is we talk about, if that's best practice, what's worst practice? Like, how could we do this in the worst conceivable way? And you'd be amazed the amount of creativity that comes out of that. And little pieces that you can then pull into creating something different. So this is a guy that works down at Weta Workshop. He does these kind of concept motorbikes. I admit that I'm a motorcyclist, so I have a love of this stuff. I don't think I'd ride any of these per se, but what a wonderfully kind of uncomfortable experience it is even looking at these things. And I just wonder if we can add that slight sense of discomfort to stuff just to make it something that's a little bit more memorable. Words that we see on brand platforms and brand strategies constantly, and on product briefs and so on. Does everyone kind of see these sorts of words? Helpful, contemporary, dynamic, encouraging. There are 110,000, oh, I don't think that's working again, hang on a second, adjectives in the English language. I don't know them all, I have to admit. Couldn't we get more creative about some of the words that we use to describe our products and our brands, and some of the value sets that we have for those, and some of the attributes that we want to feed into those platform products, and comms as well? Imagine if we started to build a product that was mad, that was bossy, that was stubborn. Everyone always wants to kind of dial up the positive attributes. Maybe it's my Britishness coming through. I just don't think that's quite how the world works. I think we connect with fallibility a lot more than we do with perfection. It'd be great for us to build in a sense of the slightly imperfect even to some of those experiences. And I think that sense of friction would really connect with people on a sort of human level. I'm going to finish with some board game stuff. So my daughter turns 4 a week today, I think, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to. Snakes and Ladders is for ages 4+, so I'm super excited about this. So obviously, I follow rules. I make sure that we're not doing that early. So I'm really hoping that she, by the way, I've tried to play it with her. She has no idea what's going on with this at the moment. So, she must wake up in a week's time and just suddenly go, hurrah, I've got it. Now, look, there's nothing enormously intuitive about Snakes and Ladders in its current form. But it's wonderful, right? Everyone played it as a kid. Why would you slide down a snake? Do you go up or down the ladders? The color schemes are all over the place. It's pretty tricky. And if we were going to go through a kind of UX and creative process around this, often what we do is go, yes, I don't know if the call to actions are quite as logical as they could be. I'm sure we can make this a bit easier. That color scheme, so confusing. Why are some yellow? Are the yellows connected? Are the reds connected? What are we trying to say about these blocks? I just don't know. Doesn't feel like a visual language. Doesn't feel like we're really trying to connect these together. Let's change it. Oh, that's better. That's better. Okay, so we've got a visual language that makes more sense now. Excellent stuff. But visual metaphors. Let's just keep this easy. Keep this easy. So you do arrows. instead of snakes and ladders. That's much better. Yeah, I get that now. So I land on 20, and then I move up to 59. Excellent. Not quite sure why should that be to blue? Is it purple? Purple and pink. Does pink mean down? Does it signify down? I'm just not sure. Icons. So there's a flat. That go is a bit garish. I'm just not sure about that. That's a bit. No, people know that a flag. Does a flag mean a start or does a flag mean a finish? I'm just not sure. The colors are still pretty garish. I'm definitely getting some clashes there. I think we can make the arrows stand out more. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So we don't need the arrows. Let's just give people really clear instructions. It's all about, nice, simple visual and verbal language. So actually, when you land on that, we just go to 24. That makes perfect sense. I get that instantly, no problem. But the flags and the trophies could be the other way around. I'm just not sure if that says that that's where we're trying to get to. And there are a lot of steps there. There's 99 steps that people have to get through. And, there's a shortened attention span in the world. I don't know that people will stick with us for that long. So let's make it a little bit quicker. That's better. Perfect. Thank you.